for the Olympics.
Absolutely.
This is Rowena Dooley asking Sol citizens to report for duty.
Hey, greetings. Welcome back to Soul Citizens. I'm GriffinGamingRPG. Today is Sunday, August 25th, last week of the month, and we are so happy to be back with you guys. For you guys joining us today, hope you guys are doing well. I am joined today by two of my co-hosts, Soul Citizens, Soul Brothers. To my right, to your left, we have, let's see, from the far end. Let's start off on the far end this time. We've got Captain Jones. Now, I want y'all to know Captain Jones is not frozen. His camera's not frozen. That's just the picture we have of him. So, how you doing, Cap?
Well, how's everybody going with my soul friends?
Good to have you back, man. This is your second show, right? Number 2, right?
Yep, number 2.
Okay, all right.
Hopefully won't be
Exciting.
Yeah, hope it won't be terrible twos.
Nah, it'll be it'll be all right. And between Captain Jones and myself, the one and the only CaptainSeriousFun. CaptainSeriousSfun, how are you?
Greetings and salutations. It is a blessing to be in the midst of such powerful brotherhood. You know how we're going to do it tonight. Super excited, letting everybody on Twitch and YouTube know that this is a place to be tonight. So happy to be here.
All right. Now I'm going to have the struggle between having two captains on board with me today. Pardon the pun. So
you can just call me Serious Fun.
I'm going to go with Captain J and Captain SF. Maybe I'll just do that and make it easy. You know, I might have to just go that route because I can say Captain. We won't know who we're referring to. But glad to have you brothers on with me today. Today's show, we changed up. As some of you guys may know, I think our Friday advertisement went out. We were supposed to be doing a show on bounty hunting, but because we didn't have enough information that we felt would have been fruitful to have a fruitful conversation, we've changed over to another topic that I've been putting off for a while, but I actually think it's a little bit more relevant to have right now, and that's one called potent components. And so what we're going to be doing, and you might be saying, well, why are we talking about components? They've been in the game forever. Absolutely, positively correct. But components have not been in the game the way CIG has said they would be in the game. We have a very, very small taste of that. So we're going to show you guys a video before we start talking. This video was produced by Seer the Sixth, who was a former Soul Citizen. Seer, we miss Seer. Seer got married and went off to happiness and left us here in the waiting lane. And so he's reared his head every once in a while, but he was a really good brother, very informative, made fabulous videos. If you've never checked out any of Seer's videos, Check him out. As Seer is an Seer, Seer the Sixth. Look him up. Great videos. And this is one of his videos that he did on components. So I'm not sure if Captains SF or Captain J have seen this video themselves, but we're going to take a quick look at it because I think that the content here will be a good primer for those of you who want to know more about components, because I think there's some good information here. So let's take a quick look at it, and then we're going to come back and we're going to kind of use his video as a springboard for our conversation tonight. So here we go.
Hello, fellow backers. This is Sir Six with a quick guide on ship components. Here is what you need to know. This feature stands out because you can change your ship components and it will alter your ship's performance, giving you even more control over your ship. These components are described by their grades, being A through D, and have their own classes that they are categorized in. Let's look at the grading system first. Now, your grades tell you how well your components perform and if they offer some additional form of modularity. For example, grade A components give the best performance overall, and usually have an additional sub-item slot. I'll discuss sub-items in a bit. Grade B components give a good upgrade to performance and may have an additional sub-item slot. This is not guaranteed. They are still good, but overall not as good as an A. So hopefully they'll be slightly cheaper. Next, you have grade C components. These are the standard items for most ships by default, designed for average performance. And last, you have grade D components. These are the lowest grade, generally making up the NPC and AI populace. Good for emergency use to get through troubles. So people who use the Vulcan and want standard components in their ship for roadside assistance can use grade D components as a cheap option to assist players with. Now next, we have our component classifications. First, we have military. They are the best overall at their items functionality, at the expense of higher emissions and a higher price point. Next is civilians. These are the most common, wide range of behaviors to suit cost, and options to approximate all other categories, but not as specific. So to me, this seems like a cheaper option that is the jack of all trades, master of none class of components. Next up, we have stealth components. These have vastly reduced signatures and composition at the expense of item functionality. So you're trading performance for covert operations. Then we have industrial components. These are the reliably high output, low wear ratings, but have higher emissions. So if you want a durability setup, then industrial components may be the way to go. And lastly, we have competition. These are higher performing than military, but at the expense of durability and stealth. Overall, they are just designed for performance over everything. Think of this as NASCAR. After a certain amount of laps, your tires bald and you need to replace them. So, you can expect having to be extremely careful with these components. Your signature will be higher, and you can burn the components out much faster once Degradation version 2 is introduced. Just remember, in a future patch they plan to assign every ship and every component an item class. This means players will only be able to put an item of that class into a ship that can utilize it. As of now, no ship is restricted to a single class of item, with each having at least 2 classes and virtually all of them featuring civilian as an option. While this system is still in development, the idea at the core is to prevent players from making certain ships too powerful within respective areas. CIG still wants them to be enormous amounts of customization available, but this system they're still developing would do things like limit the chances of finding a military spec 85X or a Stealth Herald, simply due to people buying the best items of that type. However, you will be able to further alter your ship components with subcomponents or sub-items. These items live inside components and provide a boost to the base effectiveness in a variety of ways, but also wear out quicker than the equipment it's attached to. Let's take a look at this image. Subcomponents have 3 categories, each boosting a different set of stats for that item. First, we have efficiency. which improves the overall effectiveness of the main item by reducing power or improving cooling performance. Next is Protection, which reduces the damage being dealt to the main item by absorbing different types or reducing wear rate and misfire chances. And lastly, we have Detection, which inhibits emissions in various spectrum from the main item or provides resistance to scanning. And just like regular components, subcomponents seem to have grades too. Looking at the chart, you can see the different setups you can make. For example, if you decide to use a grade A military component, you can use a subcomponent to lower your emissions. Another example, if you want a full endurance build on an industrial component setup, you can tailor subcomponents as such for ships and further decrease the wear rate, or decrease your emissions. And also, these would be the first line of defense. Your sub-items will break down faster than the components attached to. I'd rather lose these before losing a grade A or grade B component, so I'll make sure to stock up on these once they're in the verse. If the video was helpful, feel free to like it and share with others to get this information out. As usual, I thank you for stopping on by, but till next time, fellow citizens, I will see you on the flip side.
Okay. So again, this is a primer for us to talk about this with components. I don't know, there we go. I don't know, captains, how far back you guys go when it comes to some of the testing that was done with components back in the day. But I remember when we used to have to go into the MFD and make adjustments to components and stuff. Do you guys remember that at all?
Oh yeah. You had to turn up or turn down various stuff or it would burn out.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
I definitely remember having to do that. And it made portions of flying a lot more active, right? It was a precursor, I think, to engineering, right? Because you had to, you could overclock, correct. There was a lot of overclocking, right? To get more out of a component. And you're always, because you're used to this in other games, you're worried about when's this going to bite me in the butt, right? And there wasn't a lot of that. There was a lot of the other side of it, which was getting a little bit more out of it. So yeah, I definitely remember that. How about you, Captain Jones? Were you around for that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I used to constantly theory craft what's going to be the best module and component for this thing. I remember at some point, the thought process was that, military ships were going to be using certain type of components. And so, if you had an industry ship, you was going to use certain type of components. Racing ships use competition. You had the civilian as kind of the all hands on deck, could be used everywhere. And, if you didn't have a military ship, the military component wasn't going to work. So all that was very interesting. And then it all went away. You could use any component on anything. We used to be able to power off individual areas. Somebody in chat mentioned that we could overclock certain items. Sometimes, depending on the ship you had to turn certain things off just to make something else work. I just stared at the little wear and tear function on there, wondering why that didn't do anything. So there was a lot of minutia to it back in the day.
See, now that's the part that gets me, Cap, because I remember this is back when we only had Hurston. And I remember when I would travel from Hurston to Port O, and I was in an Avenger, that I would have to do some tweaks to keep my quantum drive from overheating. I would get about 3/4 of the way there and the thing would shut off on you and you'd sit in space and it would have to cool down and then you would have to fire up again to take off. And I remember if I forgot to make those adjustments on the way, I don't know what it was. I reduced something. It was something with power that I had to reduce in order to make sure that the quantum drive could make that shot trip in one shot, and I remember that. And to your point, they did take that away. Now, my question to you guys, and chat, maybe you guys can help us out with this. This video was made a little while back, and this was based upon the original design doc that CIG put together for what they want to be able to do with components. Now, I know, to your point, Captain Jones, you said that, and then that all went away. There was a point where CIG basically made everything equal, right? They didn't make all these great distinctions. What I don't know is that did CIG just do that for testing purposes and they've thrown it out? Or is it something that they did for testing purposes and they're working on it so that later it will be introduced maybe at another tier or, more improved version of what was there? Because I hear people saying classifications and all that stuff's going out the window. And I know CIG said that they weren't doing it now, but I kind of still think that this might be something they're still going to do. I don't know. What do you guys think?
So I will say this: I absolutely believe that they evened it out because they wanted it to be a consistent platform in order to test other things. Right. That having all of the nuance and variability that Captain Jones just described created too many parameters for the testing of other things they wanted to test and solidify first. Right. So my guess is that it will come back. It won't come back exactly the way it was, right? But what it will come back integrated into the tuning component that they've talked about with regard to engineering, right? So what they want to do is always give players flexibility. So, if you want to put military or even competition components in a carrack and go out and do exploration, you can do that, right? But your tuner and engineer is going to be working triple overtime, right? To make sure the stuff's going to continue to work, right? And you're not going to be able to run those components at 100% or whatever, right? But it'll be something like that. They will definitely bring it back, integrated into the engineering and tuning gameplay that's now emergent, right, for Citizen. So that's my
Risto Squared says all of that early component stuff has to be testing for larger ships, and I think he might be onto something, or they might be onto something, because CIG, when the engineering thing came out during 323, one of the things they talked about was that for the smaller ships, that whole engineering dynamic won't be as demanding as it will be for the larger ships in the game. And just so you guys will know, they talked about sub items in this video. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But, my guess is, and we said this before the show got started, that quite often people think when Chris Roberts talks about fidelity and immersion, there's this dynamic of people thinking about visuals. But the dynamic of fidelity and depth that he's talking about has to also deal with the depth of the gameplay itself. Right now, components are literally kindergarten level, right? I mean, it's nothing more than here's a grade, here's a class, boom, put it in, and that's it. But that doesn't fit the scheme of Star Citizen. If you look at how Star Citizen is being designed, it has some level of depth. So we're going to break this down a little bit for you guys and talk about some of these. Now, mind you, yes, will there be some theory crafting? Yes, but it will be based upon what CIG has put out previously. And only the future will tell whether or not this is going to be the type of things that they're going to do later on. Okay. So let's cover this real quick, guys. Captain Jones, I'm going to come to you first on this. If you got any comments on it, but I'll read it. This is where they talked about size categories. And it says, aside from fuel tanks and utility hard points, all these items are swappable and to ensure balance fall under one of 5 size categories. Vehicle, which is 0, small 1, medium 2, large 3, capital 4. And we guys know that that's the classifications when we look for stuff right now. Each item port is restricted to a single type and size, meaning you cannot put a power plant on a hard point that a cooler occupies, nor can you swap two small shield generators out for a medium shield generator. The jump in output between each item varies, but it can roughly be considered to be 3-to-1 ratio. And in 3 small items, give roughly the same output as 1 medium. Now, I don't know if those ratios are true, Captain Jones. I don't know how much you've monkeyed around with components. Do you sense that components have some differences right now? I know with quantum drives we get it, but are you sensing any other when it comes to changing, components at all in the game?
Yeah, so certain components, like power supplies, for example, you can see noticeable difference when you jump between the different sizes. I think when this originally came out, when they're originally planning it out, that was a time when we didn't have the physicalized components. So it was easy to throw things into categories and say, hey, if you got a size 2, you're going to get this. You got a size 3, you got that. Now that a lot of newer ships have multiples of smaller components to try to equal up to that bigger component, you can really see the difference in the gains.
Yeah.
You could throw a bunch of smaller shields on, but you could still want that bigger size shield. So now that things are physicalized, it's going to be very interesting to see how components being limited to the structure of the ship really impact what you can do with those. Because before you just kind of plugged and play, and bigger was always better.
Yeah. Moad, actual. Yeah, I know out of 12 years, we're still in theory crafting and it hurts. Yes, but there's a reason why we're talking about this now, because the engineering career is now being implemented. And this is actually part of that. And I think that beyond dealing with fuses, which is where we're being introduced, I think that this thing with components is going to be another factor. And we'll explain to you a little bit later why we think it might be kind of crucial. Captain Serious, is there anything about sizes you want to say before we go on to item grades? Because we can, unless everything's been covered, is something you want to say about it?
No, I mean, just the way that we experienced it was that you saw these sizes, you saw different size ships, different size components, and you immediately thought bigger was better.
Mm-hmm.
And earlier on, there was an opportunity to really test that, right? So you'd be like, wait a minute, what am I getting for some of these smaller component sizes and smaller stuff? And you all remember that, for example, the electronic signature of the ship wasn't just impacted by stealth components, but it was impacted by turning off and on components, right? And earlier on. And so, you could get a lot more gain in your stealthiness early on, turning off a medium component, right? Than you might get from a small component. So there was gain in that too. So yeah, it was very interesting. It was an interesting early test of some of these things. I look forward to, the ultimate engineering implementation.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's take a look at this next category for item grades. Thracazox, thank you so much for that community sub.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate that. And
Outstanding.
And Pops in Space, thank you for the earlier resub. 24 months. Thank you. We appreciate you. Item grades. Every swappable
39
item.
months.
Was it 39? Oh, that's my bad. I'm getting old. Can't read. Okay, thank you. 39
That's right.
months. Can't read. For item grades, every swappable item in the game is assigned a grade for ease of comparison. This should be your first port of call when deciding what items to buy and swap out, as it gives you a simple scale to compare against. Additional details about the individual nature of an item will be visible in the purchase screen by the vendor. But for a place to start, we provide a simple letter grade. Standard Dev, one of our longest subscribers. Thank you, Standard, as always. We appreciate you.
4 years, 4 months.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
He's like one of the first people that subbed to us. Different grades have different values to their items. Grade A, the best possible performance, usually has an additional sub-item slot. We're going to talk about that in a second. Grade B, a good upgrade to performance, may have an additional sub-item slot. Grade C, the standard item for most ships, but by default, it gives you average performance. And then grade D, low grade, generally made up for NPC AI populace, good for emergency use to get through troubles. Most ships come with standard. Is that there? Oh, I had that next page up. Hang on. Got to make sure I bring it up for you. Most ships come standard with default C grade components. Some of the more exotic or specialized ships may come with grade B equipment and default loadouts, which can often be seen reflected in their price. Of course, the reverse can also hold true, where the cheapest ships may come with D grade components by default. They'll still work fine and get you where you want to go, but you'll want to consider upgrading them after a while. Okay. Captain Serious, I'm going to come to you first on this one. When you've been purchasing, I know that, when we get our ships now, when they come stock, they come with the C grade component. And I know that right now, most times people right away, they try to go for an A grade, but are there pros and cons? Have you seen any pros and cons to when you go to a B or A or a D grade component?
Oh, absolutely. There have been pros and cons, particularly when it comes to overheating and quantuming. right? I've experienced those most radically. I would there was a period of time where I would just throw military grade A in everything. Military grade A, right? We haven't even talked about the military, the item classification, but it was grade A, right, into everything.
Right.
And then you go to fly somewhere and you can't get there.
Can't get there. Right.
Right. Whereas when you just took the ship out as it came, you could get there. Right. And so the game was beginning to think about how to force you, into consequence and choice. Right. And the big example for me was the Scorpius. Right. Scorpius with the standard components could get certain places and you upgrade it and then you can't get to those places around the standard system. Right. And then you're like, wait a minute, why can't I upgraded that component. So you had to start thinking about how to maybe I fly to this location with another ship and then pull the Scorpius because I want those grade A's in it. But you start thinking more planetary operations for fighters, which is the type of choices that I want CIG to force us to make, right? But understanding what that formula was and how it's changed over time has very much been driven by this testing with each patch. What does it mean to put grade B and C in and see what it does for various operations and components? I also wonder about the synergy that you might get from having all of the same grade across the board, right? So will it be the case that if you have all grade C's, they work better with each other because they're all of the same grade, then it might be to have grade C, and then have one grade A, right? Maybe sometimes that gets you something, but maybe sometimes it harms you because you no longer have that component synergy of things that are looking to work together. And so I go in and try to test that each patch in terms of the mix, because to our earlier point, CIG sometimes will slide some of this stuff in, right? Because and so we have to see where we're at on that. But yeah, I have experienced it as definitely making a difference, particularly there was a period of time a couple years ago where I thought a lot of this stuff was turned off, but it is back on, and I'm experiencing it in that overheating and in that quantuming in particular. So.
Yeah. Lord of the Drip, I see you say I use Urkel to spec out my components energy. Now, yeah, there are a lot of us that have used Urkel. Urkel's been a great tool for people starting to just get an idea to learn a little bit about components and what works well with other things. Captain J, what about you in relation to this grading system? Do you pay attention to it? Have you been using it? Do you think it's impactful?
Initially, it was pretty impactful. Don't concern myself mostly with grades now. I know there was a question asked earlier, about the different grades and components being equalized out, and I think the reason why exactly was stated. We want people to test. So at some point, you just A must be good. I get the A and I'm golden. Other than costing more money, that might be another consideration. So the only consideration you said, can I afford that A? If I can, I'm flying away with it. There were other little things you would look at. How much power draw, how much heat did it cause if you were trying to be stealthy? How many hit points did that component had when it came to getting hit with an EMP and little things? So there's little tiny things in there now that's beyond just A must be good, especially when it comes to quantum drives.
Absolutely.
Everybody's made that mistake at least once. Go by the quote unquote meta quantum drive and throw it in there and realize you can't even get out at the atmosphere. So
yeah. I remember once trying to get from Hearst into Microtech, and I couldn't make the jump. I couldn't even get to McGill 1 with it was a class A military I think I had in. And it started coming together to me, to your point, Captain Serious. It made sense then, right? Because these military fighters are not supposed to be long range, right? They're for combat scenarios, and you want to have that performance there. And that idea of what does it mean to move across a system with a fleet of ships Well, if that fleet of fighters can't make it, now that now integrates why we need to have a Liberator, right, or a Kraken, right? So those pieces of the puzzle start to come together. So yeah, at first you're frustrated because you say, "How come I can't fly from ArcCorp, to Cellin?" But there's a reason why it's that way, right? They've kind of built that in now, and that's something that players are going to have to think about. And I think Captain Jones said something that's even more important. We're so used to having all these credits in our pocket, but but later on, paying for a Class A may not be what it is now, right? You may end up with a lot more C's and D's, or maybe some B's, because it may cost you a lot. Were you going to say, Cap?
Well, I was going to say in particular, if having Class A requires having that engineer,
yeah,
right. And if you can get somebody to come on and just pay attention and at one level, that's one thing. But if you got to have a Class A and they've got to do 3 or 4 things to keep that component where it needs to be, that's another cost, another consideration, right? Whereas if you're like, listen, I'm ferrying ship X, ship X to a location, I can have some Class D's in there and I don't have to worry as much about X, Y, and Z. So that's one thing. The other thing I'll say is, and this is a little bit off topic, but we raised it in the chat, which is we talked about Urkel and these tools that are external to the game, but that in their utility reveal the depth of the game that's behind how we play, right? Like if you don't go to Urkel, you may not understand DPS trade-offs and all of the numerical detail and depth that's already in the game, right? And I would not admonish, but I would ask CIG. For me, one of the things that's that I pay attention to is how often do I have to go out to third-party tools to have the full experience, right? And right now it's really hard, other than intuition, right? To really get a sense of some of the stuff that you can get from Oracle in terms of laying out your component strategy. And I would just ask CIG to consider how we better do that with in-game tools and an in-game experience, right? Now, Urkel is nothing but, you pull out your notepad and start calculating, right? And paying attention. But some of it is also data mining too, right? It's not just me as a player using my gumption to decide to take a look at certain things. So I just ask them to take a look at that because I don't want to have to always go outside of the game experience. Yeah. Right. To understand some of these things.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Captain Jones, what do you think about that thing that Sear said, which I never thought about? The person who owns a Vulcan, right? He's out there hired to go help people when they need repair. The guy that rolls up with your Vulcan is just loaded with a bunch of D components because basically all he's going to do is make sure you can get someplace to get your stuff fixed. His job is not necessarily to supply you with a Class A, AAA, quantum drive. No, he's just there to make sure that
you giving you no die-hard battery.
You mean the Sears discount battery, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought about that. Because everybody, like you said, we get a Class C, you don't even think about a D. But if you're stranded, and particularly when we're talking about single seat fighters, smaller ships, I'm not talking about anything like a Carrack or anything like that, but I am talking about that single seat ship, and you just need to get moving because you got disabled. That a Class D, you'll probably be thankful for it, right? Probably. Uh-oh, did we lose Captain Jones? I think we lost him. Uh-oh, we better. Oh, there he is. Okay.
You hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. I see the Vulcan and Vulcan type ships. I'm a Crucible owner. It's more like your AAA. It's kind of roadside service. So, you might be broken down and you might be happy to get those Class Ds because those Class Ds get you back to where you need to be. So having a D is better than having nothing.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of those videos that we saw, like the one with Jax McCleary, where he was looking at all the different scavenge components, and some of them even not even being human. I think there were some Geon and all kinds of other components out there, and maybe legal, unlegal. And you saw ships were pieced together with, look like Valkyrie engines on a Cuddy Black, things like that. I could see that happening. So if you're you're out in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether a component is A, B, C, or D, I think that starts to go out the door. It's like, can I get home?
Yeah.
And worry about what I got once I get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next topic here. This is let's see, where are we at here? We saw that. We're here. Item classifications. In the future, this is supposed to be, this is when we were in 3 point whatever. We plan to assign every ship and every item a component class. This means players will only be able to put out, this is hazy, y'all, so bear with us here, that players will only be able to put an item of that class into a ship that can utilize it. Now, that was the way it was back in the day. We get it. It's not that way now. All right, military, the best overall at items functionality at the expense of emissions and cost. There's another variable that we could talk about too with that. Civilian, the most common wide range of behaviors to suit cost, options to approximate all of the categories, but not as specific. Stealth, vastly reduced signatures, consumption at the expense of functionality. Industrial, reliably high output and low wear, but high emissions. And then lastly, competition, high performing than military, but at the expense of durability and stealth performance over everything. Okay. Let me ask you guys this. Do you guys lean toward any of these? Does it depend on the situation? Do you care about them right now? Is it all about the money? Captain Jones, I'll go to you first on this one. What are your thoughts on these different classifications?
I always found the classifications interesting when thinking about what I would like to have out there long term. You know, I'm a explorer at heart, so trying to do that, go where no man's gone before. You know, the old Star Trek, go out for 5 years and not come back, and thinking of what kind of components is going to let me be able to do that successfully. However, in this day and age, I don't think about it at all. So I used to be one who spent a lot of time going through trying to hit each ship with best in class of everything. Then, patch come out and I start all over again. And then I started to realize there really isn't that much difference in our current gameplay in those. I do put a little consideration into the quantum drives.
Right.
Whether it's about getting there faster or just being able to get there. But I've noticed that more cases than not, because most of the components, like, not a lot of, if you have a class A shield, industrial or competition, it really doesn't matter at this point. However, if they do it the way they described and what you described here, yeah, I'll find that very compelling, especially when it comes to, the wear and tear.
Yeah.
And, I couldn't see myself using competition in exploring if it's going to burn itself out quicker. Something that I know that's going to be, reliable, let me just stay out there. So I think if they go in a direction that they outline, it'll be very interesting, and it'd be very, very interesting mixed with the engineering gameplay, because one of those types of components an engineer could probably tinker and add some longevity to it, whereas other ones are going to burn out and you're just going to have to replace or go back home.
Yeah. A brother named Ananzi, thank you for that sub. Appreciate you being here 8 months, and I love what you threw in there. I got soul, and I'm super bad. I love it. Thank you for that. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Love that. Let me ask you this before I go to Captain Serious, Captain Jones. Do you think that most people who are involved in PvP, do you think that their just initial thing is to just automatically, when they see military, decide to just throw everything in military? Do you think that that's it? Or do you think that they mix it up somewhat?
Yeah, in PvP, you mix it up, because you're looking at what that specific opponent can give you from a competitive edge, whether it's shielding or how many shots you can get off on the guns. Not all guns are created equal, even though they've been somewhat normalized over the years. There's a lot that you would look in PvP. If you're in an eclipse, the components you want in that's going to be different than a Gladius. But ultimately in PvP, you want guns that are going to hit hard and shields that are going to be able to take the hits.
Yeah.
The other components, people look at stuff like coolers and power supplies and all that. All of that's kind of irrelevant right now. But
Mhm.
yeah, there's definitely a meta in PvP, and out of everybody who plays, the PvPers are going to be ones that are definitely looking at the differences in the components.
Okay. Okay. Captain Serious, how about you? Classifications, any thoughts?
Yeah, even on the PvP side, Lord of the Driver going back and forth in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when it mattered when you put stealth components in a saber.
Right.
It still matters when you put stealth components in an eclipse, right? When they can hang
Mm-hmm.
out at the edge of radar and still see you,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see them, or they blink in and out.
Mm-hmm.
It's a problem, right? When you can't lock on and you can't do what you want to do, it's a problem. So I really enjoy when that functionality is in the game. Now they've turned that on and off,
Mm-hmm.
and it's had more and less efficacy as we're testing other things for whatever CIG's purposes are. But when that's on and functioning, you worry about an eclipse, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it gives more value to something like a saber.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start thinking about, well, how can I use some of these components in other ships? And so, sometimes in these PTUs, you'll get 15 million credits. I might go over, and buy up a bunch of military and a bunch of stealth versions of all the components just to see what it's like to kit it out military, what it's like to kit it out stealth. And most recently, even in live, I have been putting industrial components and looking at what a grade A industrial component really is and what it means in ships that are ostensibly industrial, right?
Right.
To see what it gets me and what I lose. And as a result, what CIG is saying about these classifications right now,
Right.
To give them some feedback. So yeah, I imagine that civilian and industrial over the long term will be the component classifications I have in most of my ships most of the time, right? Because there's going to be a cost not only of emissions but of reliability to military and competition components that I probably will not want to pay over and over again over the long term.
Yeah.
And if CIG's configured the game right, then that would be at least a consideration in my mind, right? I am very excited about these things being in the game. Less excited, of course, about them turning them on and off, but I understand it because again, sometimes they got to have a flat test bed to test other things, but look forward to how they get turned back on as we go forward.
Yeah. I know for me, I'm into the bigger ships for industrial stuff. So I'm looking at be the person in a reclaimer, right? Or an Orion or anything like that. And because I'm usually doing industrial related things, or even if it's something like a hull series ship, like a C, my initial thing is making sure that I have that my quantum spooling is as fast as possible. Because if I'm ever in a situation where I need to be able to get away, that's something I count on being able to do. I'm not trying to necessarily fight in a situation with a hull C. The other thing that I want to make sure that I do is have plenty of power available to me. Technically, when armor comes in, things like shields and stuff I'm hoping those will be the things that will counter that. But for other people, I know they may put emphasis in other areas. But for me, those are the things that I pay attention to when I'm in certain type of larger scale ships. And I think this is why we're mentioning this too, is because this next subject that we're going to be talking about, where they talk about sub items, and that CIG has just told us that engineering will be a much greater factor for the larger ships in the game, which is why if CIG decides to implement this next game mechanic that we're going to share with you guys, you'll start to understand why we're talking about components now. That they may not do it, but I think there's a chance that they may introduce this, and it's what they called sub items. And we read this when we were talking about the grades A, B, C, and D. But let's break this down a little bit about sub items. Sub items live inside components and provide a boost to their base effectiveness in a variety of ways. Currently, they are consumable parts that will wear out much quicker than their host items themselves. Without sub items, the base item still functions as normal, but will find a small boost in performance when sub items are installed. It's recommended that players carry spares for longer trips, as they need to swap these out over extended duration trips is likely. not carrying spares or not having the ability to carry spares isn't an impediment to base functionality, but should be seen as a continued maintenance loop necessary to provide an improved upon and highly proficient system. Each sub-item fits in one of three categories, each boosting a different set of stats for the item. Now, the reason why I want to focus in on this, guys, is because you guys remember when CIG introduced this whole idea about engineering, they talked about these three different positions. One was the engineer who's like overseeing everything. There was a mechanic. And then you said it earlier, Captain Serious, there was a tuner, right? So now, because right now you say, well, what is a tuner going to do? What are they doing, right? I mean, the thing is running. What are they doing? But this particular game mechanic now introduces the fact that you have somebody who understands that, just like how, for those of you who do mining, you guys know that we have these consumables, right? You buy this particular, what do you call it? Mining laser. And then there will be slots in there for it. And you can drop these consumables in, right? You get these slots that you can use. And they're saying for components, this idea is introducing that same thing. You may have one slot or two slots, but you can do things to improve the performance or add some type of something that makes this thing better. Now, it doesn't mean that if they're not in there, that quantum drive doesn't work or that power plant doesn't work, but you'll have the ability to tweak it and make it better by using these other items. So I want to go through a couple of these, and we're going to let these guys comment about it. Here are the sub items fit into these three categories: either efficiency, which improves the overall effectiveness of the main item by reducing power or improving cooling performance; protection, reduces the damage being dealt to the main item by absorbing different damage types or reducing wear rate and misfire chances; or detection, inhibits emissions in various spectrums from the main item to provide resistance to scanning. Sub-items can fit in many different items and are not restricted to a specific type of item, such as a power plant sub-item. Computer blades are not sub-items. They are their own standalone item that adds or expands functionality rather than improving a baseline stat. While currently they can only be added to a computer item, that may not be the only place that you can use them in the future. So I just threw that in about blades. Captain Serious, let me go to you first this time on this one with the sub items. Do you think that this is something that CIG might fit into this area of the tuner? Because right now all we do is just point a multi-tool at it to make it better, but they're talking about being able to, and CIG has talked about being able to tune to improve performance. Do you think that these sub items might be that answer?
I 100% think that this type of thing is going to come back to component management through facets of engineering. Now, whether it'll be a sub-item or it'll be a manipulation of the component in the direction of efficiency or protection or detection, where if you manipulate the item, tune the item in one way, you lose some of the other, right? These criteria or criteria like them will absolutely, in my view, be a part of component management, component engineering, component maintenance, component swapping, component repair going forward, right? And in fact, I think it's easier for them to make these dimensions of components than to have actual physicalized items on each component, right? And your tuner hooks up a tuning multi-tool, or you take the component out and bring it over to a tuning station. However they do it, I think these and I think these are the categories that make sense. One additional category might just be efficiency, protection, detection, yes, but also like how do I want to say it, like durability or length of
wear, like something that inhibits wear or something like that. Something that inhibits wear,
right? So maybe you don't get
wear.
Benefits in any of these three areas, but that component will last the longest.
Yeah,
right. Just running the way it runs. So these sub make a lot of sense. They're going. In my view, they're going to come back in some way. It may not be in this way, but there's going to this to me is the meat and potatoes of regular engineering.
Okay. Okay. Captain Jones, see, I can hear Captain Serious Fun is looking at his wallet, right? Because he just wants to point it at something and fix it. I'm seeing the money sink side of this. I'm seeing it just like that FPS person's got to go buy bullets. Your engineers got to go buy these little tools to go fix your ship. That's how I'm seeing it. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that either one, to Captain Serious Fun's point, I think both could work. But I see this physicality thing because they've made components physicalized. I see physical interaction with them. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think. I think it could happen. You know, and he didn't say it couldn't, but he gave an alternative. But I think that you're going to have to go into your engineer pack and pull out something just like those fuses, because you know how they throw those fuses in your backpack. I'm looking to see them take that little, what do they call those things? Widget. Whatever that widget is, and having to open up that panel on that engineering thing and slap that sucker in. But I don't know. Captain Jones, give me your thoughts. What do you think about these sub items?
Yeah, I think that's going to be important. I mean, if you look at the history of the way they flesh out stuff from Tier 0 up, he brought up mining, and mining is a good example. You can see that they're going to, I mean, I know people that used to be hardcore miners back years ago, now they don't mine at all. It's because they feel like it's gotten super complicated.
Yep.
And if you look at what they've done with engineering, you've already gone around and making adjustments to relays and having to put the right part in the right place in the ship. And that's Tier 0. And they're not going to have 3 different engineering roles for nothing. They're going to have a reason for those 3 roles to exist. And they did mention that, you know, a good engineer could be the difference between a win and a loss in some of those bigger capital ship battles, just by them being able to maintain components as they're taking damage. So if you're thinking about a bigger large ship or a capital ship, and they're saying that the engineers are going to be able to keep those things maintaining in the middle of a battle, there's no way that they're pulling out whole size 3 or size 4 components and replacing them. They're going to have to be doing something with subcomponents to fix it, jury rig it, do something to keep it going at the moment. So I think the subcomponents, already being that they already exist in mining, I can't see why they wouldn't just expand upon that and flesh it out to all the other avenues as well.
Yeah.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Sleepwalker, you said this will take another 10 years if then half of the ships still have no accessibility to their components. Let me agree with you and maybe counter you a little bit. Yes, it will take time. It did not take time for them to put that modularity into mining. Once we got the mining lasers in, that idea of consumables and the other items was just something that they made available for us to be able to do. So I don't think it will take a long time to implement that. I will, though, say that, yes, there are plenty of ships. Some of them, many ships have their physicalized components where we can pull them and, you know, take them out and everything and swap them. But there are a lot of them that we can't. Another reason why I think this will happen is CIG, we were talking about the physicalized components, right? And for those of you who've been on a C2 or a A2, you guys know what a class 3 quantum drive looks like, right? In the back of that ship. You cannot take that out of the ship. It is in there. It's hardwired in. And unless you go to probably a dry dock, maybe they'll make it so if you go to a dry dock, you can swap it. But if you want to do any type of work on it, it's too big, right? You can't even put it on the elevator. So this idea of being able to tune that item to me makes sense and they said engineering is much more for ships that size and up. Where the smaller fighters and stuff, they don't have to worry about this. I don't think that this is going to be something that scale of ship will have to deal with. Now, maybe they will, but I personally think that they're going to make single-seater ships much more manageable because obviously, as you guys know, many of those ships, you have to go on the outside of those ships to swap out parts. So if you're in space, it becomes an issue. But for ships that have interiors, and that could be something as the size of a Corsair or an Andromeda and up, those type of swap outs can take place inside of those ships. I know you say, well, there's mining is only in 2 ships. It doesn't make a difference how many ships. It's a matter of implementing the game mechanics. So whether you have 20 or 1, all you have to do is implement the game mechanic and that can happen for them. But again, this may not happen. So I'll take that into consideration. They may not do this. All we're saying is that CIG has defined these 3 engineering roles and tuning was one of them. And so this idea of sub items, kind of seems like it would land into that category versus the mechanic who is doing more of a repair situation. This talked about performance, efficiency, and other areas, which seem to fall more into the area of tuning. But we'll see.
And I would love to see, to your point, Griff, I'd love to see an engineer roll up with certain things in their backpack, certain things in their toolbox on ship, right? And it's from there that they deploy with physicalized items that, with their mix and match, plug and play, and their analysis, get certain things done on these components. I'm not against that.
Yeah. Did you see this, Cap? Let me ask you a question.
To my own point.
Let me ask you a question.
To my own point, they could do it a lot of different ways.
Let me ask you a question. Do you remember when they did the engineering show? They showed the engineer
scrutineer.
Right. Remember they showed the guy, he had that, and we had that, what's it called? It's a clothing item where they have the package on the front of them, the engineer, where they carried items in it. And so, you mean
like the pockets?
Yeah. And I guess I'm saying that because this stuff is in the game and people look at it as cosmetic and don't think about, is there going to be some real functionality that goes with that helmet that has the light on the top, right? Or that pack that's in the front of you. And I'm wondering whether this is when they did that demonstration, that's exactly what the person was wearing. So yeah, it's cosmetic. But I think it has functionality to it. That's what that particular outfit is actually designed for, to have readily accessible, instead of a backpack, you've got readily accessible items that you could pull out and use when you need to. But again, I could be wrong.
Well, I think I was thinking about engineer scrutineer, the video, but that was more talk. The video I think you're talking about is the design brief engineer.
Yeah, where they showed the three different engineering positions. Right. The mechanic and the tuner and the other one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And they showed us it was I think part of the reason people think about it as fashion is because at the last CitizenCon they showed it as sort of pyro based fashion. But for me, when I saw those different pockets on different parts of the outfit and everything, it harkened back to those construction like, workman-like, mechanic-like uniforms that you can pick up, particularly over in Hurston. And I started to think, well, what's the functionality of these going to be?
That's the ones I'm talking about. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Let's hit on to this next subject here. Avionics. In the power plant is the heart of your ship. The avionics are the brain. Avionics calculate the advanced math required for the maneuvering thrusters, track the identified targets, and automatically route power and ensure functional life support. It is unique among systems in that it can also be upgraded with additional systems such as ITTS, better turret AI, and a myriad of other options. Dooch, thank you so much for that sub. And Demorgemeyer. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Thank you. Here are some examples of avionics. Radars. They are electromagnetic sensors used for detecting, locating, tracking, and recognizing objects of various kinds at a considerable distance. We also know that we have computers on our ships, which we really haven't gotten into yet. And then we know we have scanners on our ship. Active scanning involves using an emitter to send energy at a target. We haven't really gotten to these. I think on our ships, I'm sure both of you guys have done this before, where you've opened up a ship. And Captain Jones, I'll go to you first on this one. And we've got these different slots and drawers that say radar and scanner. CIG last year did give us some ideas of seeing things with scanning. I think even one of the cutters, the most recent cutter that came out, well, it's not the Scout, is it? Which one was the one that they added the whole scanning package to? Was that the Scout?
I think it was, wasn't it? No, I
can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the latest one.
Yeah, and they sold that as kind of like this thing that would be doing scanning. There's the active and passive side of scanning. They haven't really talked about what computers are going to do in relation to our ships yet. And then we know what radar does for us as well.
It is the Scout. Yep.
It is the Scout. Okay. Captain Jones, what do you think? Do you think that these, even though we haven't gotten these yet, do you think these will be things that we'll be able to upgrade and improve? So like if you want to have a better scanner, a better radar, a faster computer, do you think that'll be something that CIG will implement for components?
Yeah, I definitely think so. So when you look at things like the radars, for example, if you ever to pull up a ship and look at its specs, you'll see not all radars are created equal. They have different sizes, different capabilities. So just like everything else that we have in our ships, I could see those being something tweaked. Just because we can't do it now doesn't not mean we won't be able to do it in the future. We've already talked about us being able to play around with our thrusters. So some ships have tons of thrusters on them right now. You never really stop to think about your thrusters. Do I have the best thrusters? Do I have some that could be more economical? Like I have some that have better durability. I'm sure that's going to scale out and translate to all replaceable parts in your ship. So,
yeah,
you know, radars might be better at, you know, one radar might be better at scanning off in a distance, and one might be better for combat and detecting stealth ships, and you're going to have to be able to figure out what's the right one or the right situation for your ship.
Okay. Captain SF, any thoughts on radar? I know that CIG has talked about certain ships that are specialized, like the Terrapin, for example, right? Those are the ships we kind of automatically think of that'll have, you know, some type of high performance level scanning or radar involved in it. But again, on our ships right now, we have these slots and drawers that are sometimes empty for these particular categories. Have you given any thought to those?
And that's been interesting, right? To over the past few years, start to come in and see ships that have these physicalized passes and have slots for radar, have slots for computers and other things, and they're not full yet. But you know, so you know that they're coming. These avionics packages are coming, and you know what I imagine is the mix of Risto squared is funny in the chat. He said all those computers on my MSR and they only run Windows 95. That's hilarious. What's interesting to think about is not only the application of the grades, categories, sizes, and other classifications for these new components. What will it mean to have a military radar, grade A, right, versus an industrial radar, or if those things apply in terms of the strengths, weaknesses, and benefits, but how that plays with all the other systems and how that plays when somebody else has something else, right? So if I'm functioning with grade A radar and you're functioning with grade C, what does that mean for my ability to locate you faster? What does it mean for your ability to see my emissions, right? All of that stuff will be interesting, right? The computers and computer blades, because we talked about that as they're not being side up but being separate. I expect to be a little bit different than the avionics package, right, of computers. So, and then scanning, you know, whether it's the MSR or the Terrapin or it's exploration scanning from the Carrack or the Aquila, you know, we do some of that now by tapping tab, right? It's really so that I don't fly into a mountain at night. It functions for me as like my pulse night vision. I look forward to a little bit more of getting back information, right? Sending something out and understanding more about the terrain, about the assets, potential enemies, potential logistics and supply locations, all the other stuff that you want to get back from scanning, and how scanning might play, because Zane talked about maps and blueprints, right? And so I'm hoping is that you can earn a map or a blueprint, or you can go fight for a map and blueprint. You can get a map or blueprint as a reward, and that gives you the layout and the terrain, or you can do the work to scan and gain access to that stuff,
as
right?
well.
And maybe you're the blueprint developer through the work that you do, right? And then you can sell a new blueprint to the into the system. So it'll be very interesting to see how this gets implemented. But the slots are there, so it's clear that CIG is making physicalized space for these components, and that they will be part of the integrated mix of how components work. And I'm all for it. I'm excited for it.
Okay, cool. All right, well, listen, we have been talking so much, we went past our commercial break time. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, just a 1-minute commercial break. And appreciate you guys being here. And then we're going to come back and I'm going to present a question to the panel here that they're not expecting. So we will be right back in just a hot second. Okay, we are on our commercial break. And if you are watching us, that means you are a subscriber. We really appreciate you guys as always. Thank you guys for being here with us today. Hope you're enjoying this conversation. It was a last-minute show flip, but these gentlemen stepped up to the par because they didn't know I was going to change this to today, and I really appreciate that they both said yes because 2 of my other panelists were like, "No, not components." So I'm glad you guys are here for this one.
Well, and you know, the fact you take the time to subscribe and support the channel, we're really appreciative of it. We just went over 3,000 followers, and to see growth of a positive community channel like that, due to the way you all lean in, just super appreciative and thankful. So.
Yeah, always. All right, 3, 2, 1. And we are back. Thank you guys for being here. Yes, we did hit our 3,000 viewers last week, Coffee. We finally got it. And we were very excited and very happy for that. And we're at 3,004 today. So we're moving right along. Let me ask you guys this before we hit on to the next topic that we've got, because these next 2 are interesting. Someone said this earlier. One of you guys, I don't know if it was Captain J or Captain SF. One of you guys said something. Oh, it was Captain J. He was talking about mining. I have a friend who loves mining. And as soon as they started adding extra stuff to do, like consumables and gadgets and this and this and this, they all of a sudden said, it's too complicated. Do you think that implementing these things might make the game too complicated? Now, I'm going to preface that by this. I think that's one of the reasons why CIG didn't put the heavy demands of engineering on single player ships, that they're making sure that if it's going to happen, it happens in a multi-crew environment. But even in that environment, it seems like they're trying to strike this balance, saying that components will work without tuning them. They even said this, right? If you don't have somebody to engineer your ship, as long as you check stuff out ahead of time, you should be okay. But if you've got somebody on your ship doing the extra work, you may find it advantageous. Do you think that this will become too, because we got more stuff to come. We haven't even gotten through. We're about halfway through. What do you guys think? Do you think this is going to get too hectic, like Captain Jones said? I thought I was going to like doing this, but man, it takes too much to run this ship.
Listen, I think that there will very much, people will come to the same way that people have come to a realization and reconciliation around mining.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing will happen with components and engineering in terms of people's favorite ships to take out.
Okay.
Right? Because if you always play the game with 3 or 4 people,
mm-hmm.
that's going to create a different distribution of ships that y'all are going to want to play with, given the work that has to be done on the ship, right? And the return on investment, right? Versus if you play mostly by yourself, right? The shit that you backed for and pledged for, some of them are going to stay in mothballs.
Mm-hmm.
They ain't coming out
mm-hmm.
because it's too much work to do it. So
okay.
There are going to be real. Because I'm one of those people with mining where I'm not like it's too complicated to do. It's too complicated to master right now.
Okay.
Right. For me, because I go, well, yeah, this may change again, and let me just let the thing develop.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't do a lot of mining because there's a lot to mining. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, I can just point and click my gun to go do a bunker. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's the same thing. Well, it's becoming the same thing with salvage. It's not quite the same thing, but it's becoming the same thing with salvage. There is a lot of depth, and I'd rather have that than the other way around, right?
Okay.
Where you're like, oh, mining, I mastered mining, salvage, FPS, everything in 2 days. Then what are you doing, right?
Okay.
So,
okay.
I like the idea that you can go deep, and I want the same thing for these components.
Okay. All right. Captain Jones, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it'd be good if it did. So just like people that understand what every different mining laser and component and consumable does to give them an advantage while they're mining, I think that should be the same case when it comes to maintaining your ship. So it'd be the same level of knowledge and dynamic gameplay. Sure, will you have to do it? No, I'm sure you'd be perfectly fine just buying or even running with the stock components and running them until they don't run. I don't think there's going to be like something that happens overnight. I'm sure it's a slow degradation of performance. So I'm sure you can just run it till it runs, but if you want to maximize, you want to tune, if you want to overclock, you want to get squeeze the most out of that, just the way people squeeze the most out of a car today. You know, you can run the car the way it is, but you could tune it and make it better. So I don't think it'll get so complicated to where people won't be able to fly the ship. Some people make it sound like, oh, I won't be able to get into my carrier to do anything.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll work just fine, but if you want to have an advantage over others, that's one area that you'll be able to get it.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. Okay, we're going to talk about just a couple of quick subjects here. Run these past you guys real fast. Life support and gravity generators. I don't know. Did I put this in the sheet? I didn't put it in the sheet, guys, so forgive me about that. But life support, it's a fixed component on the ship. Some of you guys have ships that like the 400i. You guys have that in some other ones. The Reclaimer. No, the Reclaimer doesn't show life support. The 890 Jump shows life support. Is there any other ships that has life support systems in it that you guys remember? Those are only two that I can think of off the top of my head. They are
anyone with an interior is gonna.
I meant is where you actually can see it in the ship. I just couldn't think of any other ship that had it. Right. You can see
that's showing it right now.
The spinning ball. Right. But if you notice, those are behind glass, right? It's powered by fuel, and instead of replacing it, it will be something that players can repair. So you don't have to worry about replacement on that. This is what CIG said. Okay, and take it for what it's worth. Gravity generators. Localized artificial gravity, LAG, is a fictitious technology in the Star Citizen universe that allows for counteracting or generating gravitational forces on demand. LAG setup consists of three parts. Grav plating, which are panels that affect the artificial gravity. Particle generator that converts energy into fuel that makes grav plating work, and then piping, or alternately conduits or nanotubes that connect grav plates with particle generators. These two components in particular are two things that you often hear people reference when it comes to tactical use, right, in their ships, right? If someone is being pirated or something like that. This is... do you think that these will be areas that in order to default these, they can be done from the external side of the ship, or will people have to come inside to disable these? Other than the owners, I know the owners can disable them, but I'm saying if someone's coming from the outside, breaching, do you think they'll have to breach the ship in order to have impact on these components?
So I'll start. The life support and gravity generators for me is two different answers, right? Because it was 2022, there was a Journey to 4.0 video, I think it was called Power Play, where they talked about consumables being plugged in and pulled out to manage life support in particular, right? So the same way that they've thought about mining with these consumables that tweak certain things, you had to do the same thing to manage life support. So I feel like if the consumables are required to manage or enhance or tweak life support, I would want somebody have to come into the ship to gain access to that same system in order to impact it, right? They're not talking about that for gravity generators. So I can imagine something that might be able to impact gravity generators.
Something like damage or something like that in the battle. Okay.
Right. Damage or some set of circumstances, right?
Like failure, power failure.
Right. So maybe there's a
fuse blows.
Fuse blows, disabling the ship and then doing something else and then something else. And now they can externally hammer your 0G. And we've seen them show zero G activity. And we've talked on this channel about how some folks might want to run a zero G ship so they don't have to worry about somebody taking out the gravity generator, right? And so they're always in zero G, so ain't nothing new, right? I will clank my head, because I clank my head all the time running around in zero G in some of these missions. So that ain't gonna work for me. But I think it's two different answers. I'd like to see them have to come into the ship to deal with life support, and maybe there's a series of external attacks that they might be able to make for the gravity generators.
I'm thinking, Captain Jones, I think that I'm going to modify my original statement. I guess I was thinking about how, like, when you're on a ship right now, you can target lock onto a person's, shields, or they're supposed to be like their shield emitters, or you could target their quantum drive. I guess it is still viable to say that you could have enough damage where life support could be affected, right? Where it could actually shut down, maybe because, maybe just from hammering the ship so hard. Do you think that would be a possibility, Captain Jones, as far as damage to the ship with these components?
Yeah, absolutely. So you might not be able to specifically target the life support system, but you could target things like coolers or power supply, which there in turn impact whether the life support system could run. So, and it might be easier to, use tactics to knock out a certain part of the ship that is going to affect something like gravity generators or life support, versus trying to disable the ship's shields or something like that. So, we need life support and gravity generators and all those kind of things. And, it's probably a lot easier to damage one of the coolers and let the engineers on the inside try to figure out where they're going to reallocate cooling versus trying to disable a whole ship. So, yeah, I absolutely agree that that'll be future gameplay.
Okay. Next category we have is propulsion. This is with fuel intakes and fuel tanks. The fuel tanks deliver mass in the form of hydrogen to the power plant, which in turn delivers energy to supercharge the fuel and expel it at speed. If you run out far from civilized space, you better hope that you have a AAA. Your computer will warn you when you're reaching bingo fuel and the point of no return, after which you will not be able to reach a friendly base. I don't know of any ships. I know that the freelancer Dur has extended fuel pods on it. I can't think of any other. Are there any other ships that you guys know of that have any type of other fuel tanks for long range use? I know there are long range ships, and maybe the heavy fighters are. I know that the 315P is supposed to have an extended range. But I can't think of anything else other than the Starfarer, obviously. But I think those are the only one I can think of, right? Is there anything else?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the Starfarer, it's just a little bit of maybe rule of cool. So it has those extended fuel tanks there just so that you can see that it can go further. But I think its range and capability is the same as any other ship that's kitted out to go like that.
Yeah.
The Argo Raft at one point had an absurd amount of fuel as well. I'm not sure if it's still the same. But there was a period of time where it was like the Freelancer Dur had 5,000 and the Argo Raft had like 27,000 or something crazy like that. So,
okay.
I don't, not fuel tanks to your specific point, but just capacity was robust. Yeah.
Okay. Here's another one we want to talk about here: quantum drives. A quantum drive is an engine type that's based on manipulating the quantum medium. It allows ships to cross vast distances of open space in a reasonable time. And I want to talk about two things here, guys, before we talk about quantum drives. The other one is jump drives. Now, this is something that people quite often blur the line with. When we have been moving through space in Star Citizen in the Stanton system, some people will say, "Oh, I'm jumping or I'm making a jump." But there's a difference between using a jump drive and a quantum drive. The quantum drives are what we use within the system when we're moving quickly. But the jump drives, which I think in 323, it was either 322 or 323. If you look under options, you'll notice that there is now a keybind for a jump drive. And the jump drive are ship components that are attached to the quantum drives in order to allow usage of jump points for near instant travel between star systems. Jump drives have the following characteristics. They have a recharge time, number of minutes between jumps. Fuel efficiency, number of jumps without refueling. They have a signature, easily detectable as a flash or a silenced approach. And they take damage, where hull damage translates hits onto the internal components. And then quality, the percentage of a chance that you will have a flame out or a failed jump, etc. Now, CIG has just recently introduced the jump mechanics to us with jump points. And some of these things that we just read are the things that they have referenced. Now, the things that I did not hear them reference, but I wouldn't be surprised, is about the recharge time, fuel efficiency. Those are two things that I had not heard them mention about. We know that there's a signature. The damage they did talk about. They talked about while navigating through a wormhole, if you run to the sides too many times, you can take damage and get kicked out of the jump, right? And then they talk about this quality or possibility of a chance of a failed jump. That's something else. So Captain Serious or Captain Jones, I'll go to you first on this one. Let's talk about jump drives. Some of the ships do have slots for a jump drive that you can actually see where it goes. Give me some thoughts, what you think about this here.
Yeah, I think that really lends back to some ships being older than others and being kitted out for you to be able to see that, because the jump drive, the actual physical piece of the jump drive lives within the quantum drive. So it could be multiple ways of maybe even disabling a jump drive if your quantum drive isn't properly maintained, overheats, catches on fire, or just wears out through wear and tear. The question is how does that impact a jump drive? Because they're actually married together. You know, you need a jump drive, you need a quantum drive to jump, and you don't need a jump drive in the quantum. So, you know, if people are going into sabotaging things or maybe not maintaining, it'd be interesting to see what that gameplay looks like, where maybe somebody jump drive is just fine, but the quantum drive breaks and now they're just stuck out in the middle of nowhere, and you know, putting out a beacon for that AAA service to come help them out. And now they're trying to figure out, do you got the A, B, C, or D? I started off with A and you only come here with a D. So, you know, it's going to have a lot of factors. I like I said before, I don't think any of the things are going to be a quick overnight result, where if you're not constantly maintaining something, it instantly breaks on you and you're stranded somewhere. But I do think it's going to have enough depth to it that it's going to give people that want to really dive and dig into the engineered gameplay to give them something compelling to do.
Yeah.
And speaking of that depth, you know, it spurs the question, right? Because a lot of people do not know, to your original point, Griff, that a quantum drive is not your jump drive, right? Even more people don't know that the jump drive is married to the quantum drive, right? But married in what way, right? So if I have a military jump drive, can I marry an industrial a military quantum drive? Can I marry an industrial jump drive? Or do I have to marry the same type of item classification as the quantum drive? What would it mean to marry a different item classification of jump drive to a different quantum drive, right? So all of these things for me become testable opportunities, but I'm very interested in the idea of you know, these components that you talked about. My hope is that they will maintain those, particularly when it comes to this idea of wear and tear, how damage and quality, right? We know damage, but this quality, right?
Yeah.
What am I tuning? What am I engineering? What type of jump drive did I marry to what type of quantum drive? And how does that impact failure, right? And success, right? And what does it mean to have to refuel a jump drive, right? How much will that cost on Griff's 890 jump?
No.
Because if it costs too much, it might be the 890 jump one time and then we part.
Yeah, and it lends itself to us believing that there once again will be classes, you know, class A, class B,
Right.
class D, of these different ones. And obviously what I see, and maybe again, guys, maybe I'm projecting too much here. Everything we're talking about here ties into economy, money sinks. These are things that we will be having to consider, and will drive the reasons why you need to be bringing in revenue in the game. You won't just buy that one thing, and once you've got it, that's it. There will be an aspect of wear that takes place, or damage, or because you want it because of efficiency, or some aspect of tweaking, or because it's not available in the system you're in right now. There's a lot of variables here that can constantly give us reasons for why we are always out there trying to find the more UEC, and be able to do more and more in the game. So I love the fact that these other elements are here, and I hope they implement this. A recharge time that says that once I've made a jump through a jump point, a wormhole, I can't just turn around right away and jump right back. Maybe there's a cooldown period on this thing, or the fact that when I make this jump and I want to jump 7 systems over, this particular jump drive only allows me to jump 3 jumps at a time. And now I've got to go stop, make sure that I can stop somewhere to recharge or refuel or whatever it is I need to do before I can jump further. All these different things here mean a lot to me. Even the percentage of a jump failing. I do everything right, got the fuel, got the jump drive, but there's a percentage of the chance that while I'm jumping, that there's a danger that the jump will fail and I'll pop out somewhere. All those things add to adding more depth as far as I'm concerned to the game, you know. But anyway, that's what I'm going to say about that with jump drives. Okay, we've only got a couple more things here, believe it or not. We're chopping right through it today. Systems. Power plants. Power plants supply the power that the rest of your ship will consume. It is the foundation on which all other ship systems function. Coolers. A cooler is a vehicle component that reduces heat from other vehicle components. It keeps other components from overheating. CaptainSeriousFun, any thoughts on these two? Do you pay attention to either of these? Do you think they're both important? Give me your thoughts on these systems right here real quick.
Avalanche. Glacier. I go top end for my coolers because I just want that capacity there. There are streamers who have delved into this, like Subliminal and others, who, there was a period of time where they would tell you, they'd give you the order in which you needed to upgrade stuff in terms of how it matters. And they would say that sometimes, you don't need to upgrade these coolers. You're not even getting into the full bank of cooler capacity. You don't need to upgrade that. I just felt better upgrading the cooler, keep everything cool. And it was the FR86. No, those are the shield generators. We're not talking about those. What's the power plant that I use almost all the time? I don't know. I can't find it right now, but there's a certain it's usually that tier A or tier A military. The JS, the JS 400s, 500s, right? I tend to use those as well, just to know that's taken care of. But there hasn't been a real cost on the back end for those, right? The way that I feel the costs around, say, quantum drive choice, right? So my hope is that as we start playing and start getting these multi-planetary system play, that we start seeing more of the choice and consequence of those choices.
Okay.
Those are the ones that I use.
Okay. Captain Jones, I know we've talked about how the game is currently stated now versus the possibility of them implementing this stuff. Let me hit the other ones, and if you want to talk about these too, we can talk about these as well because there's some more that add into this. Is that the right thing? That's not the right thing. Give me 1 second here. Power plants and coolers. Is it this one? There we go. There's shield generators. They protect the shield from spaceborne debris, hostile fire. Generators can come in multiple sizes and have varying levels of segmentation, single bubble, front, back, quadrant, etc. Batteries, weapon batteries to assist in recharge function of energy weapons, ammo racks to store more ballistic ammunition, additional cooling systems to purge heat loads, and devices to hide your cargo, and the list goes on and on. And then lastly, distortion field generators, smaller versions of what gives something like an Avenger Warlock its punch. Captain Jones, any of these here, importance of these systems to you in the game?
Yeah, first and foremost, shield generators is definitely one of those that's going to be important. I don't think anybody's going to argue that when looking at the description here where it says protects from spaceborne debris and hostile fire. Makes me reflect a little bit more on the way master modes works because, you know, you don't have shields to protect you from spaceborne debris unless you're in combat. So that might be something they'd be looking at to maybe readdress. But you know, all of these are going to be big factors. You know, I look at the batteries maybe working as the way we don't have the batteries currently, but we do have capacitors, and you know how the capacitors will affect how many shots you can put on target. Distortion field generation. Generally, for most of these, we don't have any kind of gameplay involved in them now, except for the shield generator. So the shield generators is definitely an impactor, and I could see that being one long term. Shield generators might even draw power from the other things like batteries, and that could be another reason why you might pick a C or D over an A, or to get a bigger power supply or a cooler that could do more cooling. I think they're going to be all dependent on each other, and one will affect the other. You know, even now you have some ships that you get in them, and the power supply stock won't even let you leave the hangar because it just doesn't have enough power. You don't know until you get out a few feet, but yeah, you lose power real quick. Or, or
Try to take that reclaimer out with Stott off of the surface of Lorville. That's slow going.
You learn the hard way. You know, you'd be flying around and your ship just shuts down because the coolers couldn't handle it. So we have a little bit of that now, and I think the details of it's turned off a little bit to make sure that they can get the testing across the board. Otherwise, people are just going to look for the meta. But I don't think there's going to be any of the things that you showed here that you're going to be able to ignore because I feel one will affect the other.
This idea about batteries, and I know there are some ships that have a panel or an area for batteries, even though that component is not in the game. But for those of you who got a chance to monkey around with the engineering when it was in Arena Commander, you saw that there was a network that ran throughout the ship, that ran to every aspect of the ship, where the fuse lines ran. And they all interconnected into these areas of the ship. So to Captain Jones's point, these are all going to be important. Now, right now, my concern is that, and I think Captain Serious, you mentioned this earlier, maybe because of testing purposes, we don't have all of the parameters here that we have to monitor all this stuff now. But later on, I think this is one of the reasons why that engineering station is going to be important. That there's someone who is there who's paying attention to percentages and able to tell if our ship is running, you know, if we're running really well right now, or, you know, we've got about maybe 10 more hours or 5 more hours before, you know, we're going to have to replace the quantum drive at this point. You know, it's worn down. You know, we've repaired it as many times as it can be repaired. It can't be repaired much more. I think that type of gameplay is going to become important. Especially for the bigger ships.
Imagine a veteran engineer walking on to somebody who's newer in the game, but who has one of those big ships and looking at the performance envelope that's reflected on those engineering stations, given all the components and where they are, and saying, hey, you know, just so you know, you want to change this out very early on. right? And here is why, and giving that insight. And that's going to be hard, to Captain Jones' point, that's going to be hard, one insight, right? From playing the game and trying different things out and being in different situations. A brand new engineer who's coming into the game with a brand new pilot is not going to be able to give that type of insight the way somebody who has been through it will be able to, right? So there's going to be like a career development arc for engineers as well. So
I'm also curious, Captain Jones, I ask you this question. I'm curious about this thing that we used to do a long time ago, which we have not talked much about since the beginning of the show, which was overclocking. You know, when we start tweaking these things, I'm assuming that there's a lifespan to these items, and paying attention to, like, in other words, maybe a item that's made by Durango has a longer life than something that's made by Aegis. Maybe Aegis gives you the performance, but they burn out 3 times faster. But, you know, those type of choices when we have to buy stuff in the game for between wear, overclocking, you know, how can I say this? You guys know how, like, with batteries, supposedly when you have certain types of batteries, lithium, they tell you to let it wear all the way down, then recharge it. Don't keep recharging it at the top. You know, I wonder if they're going to integrate that type of stuff into these different components as well. You know, some have better, they run better. This manufacturer is known for better, but it's cheaper. This other one's cheaper. Or this one's more accessible. You can find these easier. You know, I wonder if that's going to be
or you chosen a set of coolers that can cool this system to at a level of to 150%. So now you've got overclocking. You can overclock that system because you've got the cooling capacity at max to overclock it. And maybe with you have cooling capacity like that, the overclocking doesn't harm it. Right. The same way that you can overclock a video card, but if you got the proper cooling, right, or overclock your CPU, right. But if you don't have that overhead,
then you start taking damage.
You try to overclock, right, right. So I'm almost sure that overclocking will return as well. Just making those choices, and maybe those choices in the moment with a great engineer could save your life. Right.
Yeah. By the way, Fastcard said he was going to ask about overclocking. One of the things that I didn't share with you in the document for this about components was the Endeavor. One of the things that was in the design document was that the Endeavor would be the ship that would be able to do overclocking or modifying these components. What's that thing called? The ring? What's that thing called?
Superconductor.
The superconductor. Thank you. That particular module is what was highlighted with being able to make modifications to components in the game. And a lot of people talk about weapons, but components is the other side of that. So now, mind you, this was all a part of the dream, right, that CIG wanted to be able to do. We're talking about this only because as we're seeing engineering being implemented, and engineering is at tier 0, and because CIG has talked about these different roles of engineers, and because CIG has said that engineering will be much more of a real and important thing for medium and larger ships, we want you guys to be prepared to understand that this could very much be a direction that CIG decides to go. And you as a player have got to be prepared and ready for it. So it doesn't catch you off guard because you've been so used to not having to do anything with your components. I really believe that this is going to be another level of what Chris Roberts calls fidelity. Fidelity is not just about visuals, it's about the depth of the game. And I could very easily see that CIG could go deep when it comes to this area of engineering. So you guys got anything else in particular for this subject? Because we've got a couple questions that we can hit on as well.
No, I think you wrapped it up pretty well for me, Griff, in that, you know, when we're in this space, and some of what we talk about feels like theory crafting, it's also player readiness, right? Getting players ready for the idea that, to your point, you haven't had to manage any of this really before. You can get away with a lot less management, and that there will still be that. There will still be, you can just get in and go. Right. But that there's going to be depth that ultimately you'll have the opportunity to mine, not just for mining, but for just general components as well. So good stuff.
Okay. All right, well, here's a question from Pops in Space. He says, do you think Star Citizen will go the route of unique, limited edition parts that are sold by players with a high reputation? Also, would that be an unfair advantage? You guys got any thoughts on that? I'll say this while
I
they're
got thoughts
thinking.
on everything, but I'm gonna let Captain Jones go.
Yeah, listen
too.
to Captain Jones. Captain Jones, you jump in first if you want.
I mean, I think anytime someone can use their knowledge to get an advantage, it's not an unfair advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So anything in the future when it comes to engineering, overclocking, any kind of tweaking to any kind of components, see it as an advantage, but not an unfair advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, Pops, CIG has already talked about looting and finding unique items. They talked about this a little bit with NPCs when it came down to this idea of being able to take weapons off of ships. Player-made items, we still don't know the depth that CIG wants to go with that. We do know that they've talked about blueprints and manufacturing, but what those areas will be, who knows? Obviously, from an economic side, for players to be able to manufacture certain items, or if nothing else, overclock and tweak items to make them better. It doesn't even mean that they have to make them, but maybe if you're that person like Fastcart who has the super collider, he's able to take that standard component and make it better, make it more improved, and he's able to profit from that. And it doesn't mean that he has to make something unique as much as he has the unique ability to do it where other players don't, because they don't have the equipment or the ability to do it in game. So I kind of see it more that direction, but who knows, right? Because CIG really hasn't given us a lot to go on for that. Captain Serious, you got something you said? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if the question, I hear the question, will it go the route of this? I absolutely think it will, but it will not do that within 3 years or 5 years of 1.0, right? I think this is a end game, longer term thing, and I think it'll have similar depth because I think there's crafting and then there is player crafted consumables. I think those are two different things, right? Right now, for example, you can go into the Vulture and you can craft a multi-tool. That's crafting something that's already in the game. I think there will be plenty of that where that'll come sooner rather than later. But the idea of players going on a journey to craft something unique, I think CIG want to make the journey to do that as interesting as the result and the ability to sell it and put it into the economy. Right. And I sort of take guidance, and I hope they do, from like what it was like to do that in something like Star Wars Galaxies, right? Which Griff could speak to better than I could. But there was a whole harvesting experience that was tied to that in terms of materials and understanding those materials from the perspective of their hardness and malleability and heat resistance. And then imagine doing crafting in different settings with different gravities and different atmospheres and getting different results. And all of that being a journey and of experimentation that, had a chance to lead you to something that was very unique and useful in terms of the stats that it might allow for somebody to be able to purchase from you. I do think over the long term that that's something CIG would look at, but I don't think that's in the first 3 to 5 years after 1.0. I mean, that's way down the line.
Yeah. Okay.
I knew as soon as Griff said unique, I knew Fastcart was going to say something about unique. I knew it. I'm glad I've got to know you that well, sir. That's hilarious.
Okay, alrighty then. Well, we have hit everything for our show today. This is a lot of information that we got to share with you guys regarding components, and there's some links that we've put into the chat. Hopefully we'll get more information on this as engineering begins to flesh itself out more and more. But I think my prediction, gentlemen and ladies and anyone else who's out there, is that engineering is going to be a thing next year, that it is going to step up in many ways that we're not expecting. But we shall see. That's what my prediction is in regard to this. Okay. Let's talk about what we got coming up this week. Captain Jones, if you wouldn't mind, would you tell everybody about Soul Talk next week?
So we got Soul Talk coming up next week, Thursday at 9 p.m. So I believe that it's going to be
It's Fast Card.
our friend Fast Card hosting there. So 9 p.m. Eastern, jump on the Soul Talk. We'll be covering, I can see what the...
I don't know what the subject is next week. It's just ISC, SCL. Yeah, we don't even know what it's going to be next week.
ISC, SAL, whatever it's going to be amazing because Fast Card's going to be doing it.
Oh my God. What a compliment that is. Cap, would you tell them about Soul Voices?
Well, Soul Voices is run by the legend, the hero of the community, Griffin Gaming RPG. And what Griff does is he takes a look at a lot of the distribution and communication channels across the internet to see what the conversations are like and invites you for a one-on-one conversation with him and with the community at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So come on in and see what Griff's teed up from the worlds of Reddit and Spectrum and some themes that he's seeing that come to his own mind that they explore 2 p.m. Eastern time, Soul Voices on Saturday. That's part of PodSat, which is Podcast Saturday, where we go from our show, Soul Voices, into Paul Shelley and the Astropub and the Captain's Table, and then we finish with the OGs of Star Citizen on Twitch, which is Relay. So, and that's a whole day where you can you can have one earbud in one ear. You can listen to your spouse or significant other in one ear. You can listen to us in the other ear, and you can do it all day, right? And get your Soul Citizens, get all your Soul Citizens, your Star Citizen and Soul Citizens in Soul Voices Saturday, 2 p.m.
Saturdays, yeah. All right. And next Sunday, we are going to be in the month of September, believe it or not. It'll be September 1st. And we're going to be doing a show called Break My Fleet. Now, many of you guys know that our good friends over at the Info Runners have had a show called Fix My Fleet for years. But what we're going to do is have some of the Soul Citizens, hopefully several, on next week. And what we're going to do is look at our own fleets and be honest and basically say, I really don't need to have this. We're going to analyze our own fleets and see, do we have some repetition going on? Or the question might even come up, it's like, if you had to break this down to only 5 ships, what 5 ships would you keep in your fleet? So we're going to challenge you guys to do the same thing with us next week. We're going to be talking about, because over the years, some of us have built fleets that are just all over the place. And so we're not going to fix our fleets as much as we're going to break them down a little bit and think about why do we have what we have and what it is we want to accomplish with them. And then maybe we'll reassess and say, you know what, maybe I got too many of these. I could get rid of that. So if you want to have some fun with us next week as we do that, hopefully you guys can join us next week at 7 p.m. Eastern time as we break our fleets. That's what's going to be going on at that time. Okay. Let's see. Other than that, I want to say that's about it. Special thank you to my brothers that are on with me tonight, Captain Jones, CJ, and CaptainSeriousFun, CSF. Appreciate you all being here and helping us get through this show today. I know it was a last minute flip of things, but you guys came through as always and truly appreciate that. And we're glad to have Captain Jones back. He's been a little under the weather, but we got the brother back with us. We are happy to have him with us.
Absolutely.
All righty then.
Continue to feel better, Cap Jones.
Yes, sir. Please do. We are going to be setting up our raid with Verity. We haven't raided Verity in a while, so when you guys get over, hang out with Verity. She is in Star Citizen at this time. Looks like she's got a giveaway going on as well. Let her know that you came over from the Soul Citizens, and we really appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Vaverick, thank you for the 1,000 bits. We saw that earlier. We were talking, so thank you for that. We appreciate that as always. And hopefully you guys will have a great week. It's going to be hot in the Midwest and the East Coast, so stay cool. 100 degrees, real hot. Otherwise, take care of yourselves, gang. As always, peace, love, and soul. We'll talk to you soon. Ciao.